The Joe Rogan Experience.
But yeah, these guys, I attempted for about 10 years through my then organization, Quilliam, to attempt to, pretty much as happened to me on the Islamist side, to attempt to try and soften some of that hard edge of the war on terror.
How was that met with Bush?
He was charming, but of course it wasn't ever going to be Bush. It was going to be the people around him.
Right. What was his perspective on what you were saying?
The last 2 years of the Bush presidency, I think they really began getting to grips with some of this. And again, that's not a popular thing to say. And I remember the time is that those last 2 years, they began realizing that this has to be more of an ideological and intellectual conversation and not a physical war. You can't win.
Right.
Right? In this war on terror, there was no way anyone was going to win.
And so they were stuck in this situation where it was many years deep into the war and realizing that they had done everything that they were trying to avoid. We had had that one Desert Storm war, and I think people had come under the impression that if we were to invade a country, it would be very quick and very easy.
Yeah.
We had this very American-centric idea of what would go on in a war. And because of that, it made us so much more willing to enter into wars.
It's insane. It's insane. If a foreign army occupied America, would you just sit back and let them stay here for 10? I mean, come on. No man worth his salt is going to sit there and watch a foreign army in their... If anyone invaded Britain, I'd be the first to say, sign me up. Where do I join? No one is just going to let foreign troops in their land, right? So, but this madness was brought about because back in those days, Bush didn't even know the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims.
Right.
That it was just pure ignorance. That the foreign policy neoconservative machine was hoodwinked by this guy called Chalabi in Iraq, who convinced them that if you invade, everything's going to be hunky-dory. Iraq is going to blossom into this democracy. All that ended up happening is 60% of Iraq was Shia. You end up creating this satellite of sphere of influence for Iran, because Iran is Shia origin country, and it ended up having this disproportionate influence in Iraq as a result. And you end up with a situation today. I mean, it's a mess.
When you think back to this man trying to convince the Bush administration that everything was going to be fine, it was going to blossom into a democracy, what do you think was his motivation? Do you think ultimately he knew that the Shia and the Sunni would go to battle and there would be a massive conflict and that it would destabilize the region? Do you think he was aware of that? Or do you think they were operating on ignorance? Or do you think they were operating under this premise that they were going to get to control the natural resources and it was worth it financially and they would sort it all out?
Well, individual intentions aside, if you look to Cheney, if you look to Rumsfeld, and if you looked at this guy Chalabi, who was from the Iraqi National Congress, and if you look at everything that happened since then and the behavior in Iraq and beyond, it's definitely not about bringing democracy. Now, the jury's out for me. Is it oil? Is it natural resources? Is it strategic positioning? It's definitely not the reason that we were told, and it certainly wasn't weapons of mass destruction. That was all built on a lie. And that's also come out since. The dossier.
Do you think they knew about the lie for sure? I mean, how many people do you think knew about, like when they were broadcasting it on CNN, weapons of mass destruction, we have to invade Iraq? Who do you think knew that was not
remember
true?
Colin Powell?
Yes.
I'm quite sure he knew he was speaking bullshit.
God, that's so hard to believe.
Yeah.
That's so hard to
sad.
believe because he was
a good
so
man.
admired.
Yeah.
And, when you have an example of a man who is a distinguished military career and then goes on to be a distinguished politician, he's one of the best examples we've ever had.
But you remember, he was opposed to it for a long time.
Yes.
And then he gave that one speech, I think it was at the UN.
Yes.
And I think that's the point, that he knew what was going on. He was opposed to it. He didn't want to follow this.
He had a vial of something.
And then
right?
somebody gave him something. And then he said, all right, And I think when he did that speech...
Yeah.
I think he knew in his heart something's not right.
What was the vial? What did he have?
I can't remember, but it was used as evidence, right?
Yes.
What we've had since in the UK is an inquiry, and they found that Tony Blair pretty much, they all knew that something wasn't right with this intelligence they were given. And this 15 minutes thing, it just wasn't right, And the guy that exposed it, one of our scientists in the UK.
15 minutes thing?
That Saddam can strike within 15 minutes.
Oh.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And there's a guy who, in particular with the weapons of mass destruction. Now, again, caveat, Saddam is no picnic, right?
Yes,
I mean, the man has gassed his own people. He's the Iraqi equivalent of Mubarak that did what he did to us in Egypt.
And his sons were the most evil.
I mean, look, again, people think I'm going to defend... This isn't about defending Saddam.
It's just true.
The first death in our organization, my former group, was in Iraq. One of our members was tortured to death by Saddam. We were attempting to overthrow Saddam too, right? So this is no favoritism to Saddam Hussein coming from me. What I'm saying is that you don't go in into war based on a lie. And this guy called Dr. Kelly in the UK, he was the scientist from our defense sector who exposed this lie. He turned out dead a couple of weeks later. No one knows what happened to him, but he's dead. So it's just all weird, right? But looking
Died
back,
of what?
they found him dead in his car. I think it's officially it was suicide, whatever. Who knows? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Was Epstein suicide? I don't know.
I say no. What
Yeah,
do you
I mean,
say?
no, it doesn't look like it, does it? The
I get
cameras were
very
off.
uncomfortable when people say he did commit suicide.
It's a bit weird, isn't it?
Well, I start asking them questions. Like, why do you think that? Like, did you look at the autopsy? Did you ever hear Michael Baden speak about it, where he talks
Well,
about
the
the
cameras were
ligature
switched off.
marks at the bottom of his
Yeah,
neck,
yeah.
which indicate he was strangled?
Yeah.
Did you hear about the broken bones rather in his neck?
Yeah.
Like that don't exist
Yeah.
normally when people hang themselves. They
no.
usually are only from someone being strangled.
Yeah.
There's a desire, the camera thing,
Yeah.
the security guards conveniently sleeping.
Yeah.
Like there's so much.
Yeah. It's all strange.
But it's
Yeah.
in front of everybody's face. Watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. Ta-da!
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit.
If the lie's big enough, right?
This is a good one, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite extraordinary that they were able to pull that off. They were able to pull that off in front of everyone's eyes.
Well, I mean, I don't know if they've pulled it off. I'm not so sure people deep down really, really, truly believe that's. I mean, everyone I think realizes is more than meets the eye with that.
Yeah, I think so,
But people
too.
don't want to speak about it.
But it's gone on long enough
Yeah.
that I think it's going to be a part of the past.
Yeah.
And people are just going to go, what happened to him? Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
What happened to Kennedy? Who knows?
Like I just said with Dr. Kelly, right?
yes.
Who knows?
Who knows?
But what we have learned from that is that it's easy to manufacture consent around something that isn't true for foreign policy purposes. It was done with Iraq. And my whole thing was, how do we stop that happening again?
Right.
That's what I was trying to do.
With Bush.
With all of them.
Well, when you
All
were
the way through to Cameron.
what kind of dialogue did you have with Bush in terms of like trying to convince him to take a different approach?
Well, so as I say, in his last 2 years, they were listening. So I met with Secretary Chertoff, who founded the Homeland Security. He used to be a judge. And we would work very closely with Homeland Security and that entire group. And what happened was, if you recall, so those last 2 years, then Obama got elected. And as always, just as we felt we were beginning to make progress, I mean, one of my bugbears has long been we have to shut Guantanamo Bay down. This idea that we can throw people in jail for years and years and years over decades with no charge, right? It started with jihadi prisoners. You move to Syria, it moved from jihadi prisoners to their wives and their children now. So there's just been a jailbreak in Syria, an ISIS attempted jailbreak. Now, there's a bit of detail to that story that's more interesting than the fact that ISIS, in the first organized attack for many years since the fall of their so-called Islamic State, have demonstrated that they've regrouped because they had a full frontal assault on this jail. But that's not what interests me. And I think that the Kurdish forces have retaken it just yesterday. What interests me is the detail in this little story. And that is that it turns out that there were hundreds of children in this jail. Children born to ISIS fighters who nobody wanted to take care of, so they threw them in this adult jihadi prison. Hundreds of children, some of whom died in this attempted jailbreak. So we've gone from, and this is when the Overton window shifts in that way, when you think, Bush's years, if only, our value system has shifted so much to a point. We are now living with this idea that our states and our allies can throw children in jail for years with some of the most dangerous people on the planet. And it went from jihadis in Guantanamo to in Syria now to their wives and children, including, by the way, Western citizens. So this jailbreak, some of the kids that were killed, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, Western citizens, Australians, and others, American. There's an American kid in the Times newspaper.
And why were they in the prison?
Because they were taken there as kids by their jihadi parents. And nobody wants to do, no Western government, credit to America, under Trump, you guys took back all your foreign fighters from ISIS. Britain hasn't done so, nor have most European
Took back
countries.
all our foreign fighters?
Who were Americans who went to join ISIS, yeah. They're now
Really?
back in they're back in, you bring them back, and if there's a crime to answer for, you put them on trial. But what you haven't done, what America hasn't done, is say, you know what, I don't give a damn. They might be American, but they can stay in Syria. And even if they're sentenced in Syria, say they finish their time, where do they go?
Right.
So that's what's happened is nobody, so there's camps, there are entire camps, they're just internship camps, concentration camps or intern camps, like Camp Al-Hawl in Syria, where there's women and children, kids from babies, and they're growing up and they're giving birth in these prisons, and no one's charged them or convicted them of anything.
So they're essentially being raised in these prisons.
They are born and raised in prisons.
Jesus Christ.
Now you go from Guantanamo to that, and I'm going to bring you to another stage, right? We're talking about the Overton window of acceptability shifting. We've got a Home Secretary in the UK right now called Priti Patel. She then suggested that what do you do with these boat people that come over from France and they're trying to cross the English Channel, undocumented migrants, they're landing in Britain. What do you do with them? She said, I know what we can do with them. Arrest them and then put them in a camp in Rwanda. So we've gone from arbitrarily interning jihadis to arbitrarily interning their wives and their children to now arbitrarily interning anyone who's undocumented in these camps. That's not the kind of world I want to see going forward. It's like that movie, Elysium, right?
Yes.
That's not the kind of world I want to see going forward. So this is the kind of thing that I was upset with in that machine. And I'm trying to work in the machine to say, what you guys are doing is making the problem worse with this kind of behavior. Power, brute force, does not fix your problems.
And these conversations with Bush in particular, like what was that like? How did he respond to this?
So Bush was one meeting. And after that one meeting, I was able to speak to the administration. And as I say, so for the last 2 years, we felt we were beginning to make progress. Obama gets in, and then they want to reinvent the wheel. And a lot of people, when they look at Obama, they think, a great president. Again, I'm not going to mince my words, and I don't want anyone to say, see, Maajid is this or that. Guys, you got to understand, I didn't even come from this system. I wanted to overthrow the whole thing, Obama and Bush together. I was anti-democracy full stop. So this is not about me supporting Bush, supporting Obama, supporting Trump, supporting anyone. I'm looking at this from the outside and seeing what's going wrong vis-a-vis this specific debate, yeah? And speaking objectively about it, regardless of whether you're left-wing or right-wing. So Obama comes in, and this man launches more drone strikes than Bush, has a kill list, which Bush never had, that is unaccountable. That kill list he made, including American citizens, was not accountable to Congress. So on the physical war side, he basically did even more than Bush did. With his assassinations, with his NSA spying, with his military approach to solving problems, with his drones, more drone strikes than Bush ever conducted. He just ratcheted up the military side of this. And we were then, when Obama became president, my work was for a long time ostracized from the Obama administration because of this point. And then where he should have done something, like the rise of ISIS, completely useless.
So your work was ostracized because you were working towards peace and a less brutal approach, and he was conducting drone strikes and
they didn't want to hear what I just
surveillance.
Said to you. Yeah.
They just didn't want to hear that.
They didn't want to hear it.
And but they knew your position. And did you eventually get to meet with him?
Not him.
Not him. Wow.
I met Hillary Clinton. I met Madeleine Albright, but I didn't meet Obama.
Did you ever meet anybody? They smell like sulfur.
What?
Any of those people?
What?
Where you're like, they're evil. This is an evil person. This is for sure straight from hell.
So anyway,
just fucking around.
Yeah, no, it's good enough.
But you met Hillary Clinton. You met George Bush. Who else did you meet inside the organization?
On the U.S. side, Madeleine Albright, Secretary Chertoff, when he was head of the Homeland Security Department.
Was any one group or one administration more open to your ideas?
Well, the same thing happened. It's usually the case, right? It takes 6 years. Last 2 years of the Obama administration, like the last 2 years of Bush, they began listening to us. And then, of course, Trump comes in.